What's going on, everyone? Today I've got an ammo can. The point of what I want to discuss is, of course, what is inside of the ammo can. The idea based around what I put together inside of this ammo can is when I leave for a trail run, trying to make my life a little simpler. When you leave, you probably decide whether or not you're going to carry a backpack, possibly with some tools and parts and things like that. But then there's also those items that it would be nice to have with you, at least, even if you didn't have them on your back. And that theory is what we've got here. Now, I don't ever plan on taking this ammo can with me on a trail run. That's not the idea at all. The idea is that when I leave my house or I leave the shop, I grab the ammo can and I put it in the trunk of my vehicle and we head out on the trails. And then if something more catastrophic happens or things like that, I've got a number of parts, tools, and hardware with me to try and fix almost anything in a reasonable fashion. So we're gonna pop open this ammo can and I'm gonna show you what I put together inside of here. Along the way, if you think of something that maybe I forgot or didn't think of or would be incredibly handy that I've got room to still fit in here, absolutely drop a comment with that below. I'd love to keep evolving this little setup to have everything I could possibly need. So of course, the idea behind an ammo can is that you've got something that's sealed off and you can hold almost anything inside. When I went shopping for this ammo can, what I did is I grabbed the ammo can and then I went around and found the containers and fit them in there, making sure that they would fit in the most efficient way that I could plan on. But let's start to pull items out. We'll go over them one by one and I'll kind of show you what I've included. First of all, I grabbed a flashlight with a magnetic base. It mounts onto the inside of the case really easily. It's the type of flashlight that has a bright light on the side, kind of a work light, and also a traditional flashlight. The work light has multiple dimming levels and a flashing strobe function. It is nice that you could turn on the work light type function, set it on the lid of the ammo can, and it illuminates everything inside fairly well also. I do have it separated into two main compartments. The one here I've built a divider for with some 3D printed standoffs to make sure that nothing moved around and it stayed flush. And then on the end here, I've got a bunch of my tools that I've selected to try and narrow everything down as much as I can. We'll get to that in a minute. Next to it though, I've got some containers with things organized as well as some items that are just kind of more loose in there. Pulling out the large flat container that fits on the side, this is a Plano container and I'm actually using some Protect tire bands to wrap around all of the containers that I've had in there, just to make sure that, you know, if a clip comes open, it still is held as secure as I can, just so that I don't end up with parts rattling everywhere. So inside of this container, we've got an assortment of items. In this top corner, I've got Axial SCX-102 gear sets with all of the bearings needed to use those, as well as spare screws to help attach ring gears to lockers. On the compartment next to it, I have got 2 or 4 of almost every size bearing that I use in almost any of my vehicles. Next to that one, I've got a bunch of wild bore and MIP drive shaft parts. I've got assorted sizes of heat shrink. I've got spare rod ends and pivot balls, a small collection of 4-inch zip ties, and a small wrap of safety wire that I use. I've got an extra 25 and 24 tooth servo horn in both 20 and 24 millimeters. This way, if anybody strips a servo horn, I probably have a replacement. In the corner here, I've got some Holmes BEC bypass adapters, and I've got a BEC as well as extra brushless sensor wires. Next, we'll pull out one of the other two Plano containers. Again, I'm using the Protect tire bands to keep those latches closed. These actually go over the latches on this one, so should be more secure. On the first side, I've got extra AA's and AAA batteries. This is a shrink-wrapped bag of latex gloves, and I've got a regular Bic lighter. Lighters can come in handy in several situations, and specifically, I'll cover why I've got this one. On this side, I put together a small hardware pack of M2 by 10 pins. These are your typical wheel pins, as well as some of the M1.5 by 8 pins. Those are the pins that you use on the top shaft of an axial 3-gear transmission. Next to that, I put some 3mm by 3mm set screws, and then some 3mm by 6mm set screws. Next to that one, I put together another little hardware pack. These are M2.5 screws, these are M2 screws, and these are some M4 set screws. Next to that is one of those super handy little MIP grease and thread lock containers. Theirs comes in more of a gel format, so it doesn't move around. It's easy to keep. It's super nice to have on the trail. I think that was the perfect little addition to this kit. This is a little screw pack I put together for VP wheels. This has got both 440 and 164 hardware in it. The 440 hardware, I've got both 1/4 and 3/8 inch long, the most common sizes used. I threw a small stack of rare earth magnets in there. No idea what I would need these for, but it seemed like an easy thing to add to the bin, and who knows where these could possibly come in helpful. Then I've got a little compartment here of just specialty hardware. And what the specialty items I would consider is things like SCX 10-2 kingpin screws, the large head style servo screws, standard set pin styles. These are what you use to attach drive shafts to pinions or to transmissions. And then I threw a set of brass knuckle bushings in there. Those can also be used in other situations other than just for knuckle bushings. But of course, if you lose a piece of hardware and your knuckle bushing comes out, nice to have also. Next, I put together a compartment of body pins. I put together 3 different sizes, from the super small, the standard that we use on most stuff, and then even some of the large ones. Then standard replacement wheel nuts, 4mm thread wheel nuts that you use on most SCX 10-2s, bombers, things like that. And then here on the end is something that I've never tried and I've only ever seen on the internet in those little gimmicky ads, but I fell for it and I included them. And this is partly where that Bic lighter comes into place. These are supposed to be for soldering without a soldering iron. So you take and you put your wire in from both sides, and then there's a piece of low heat solder in the middle there. You're supposed to be able to just heat it up with a lighter or a heat gun, and it'll actually melt and solder your 2 wires together. There's some colored bands towards the end, and those are actually some sort of like adhesive or extra adhesive to keep your wires from moving around. And of course, it's all contained within a piece of heat shrink. I would likely never suggest using these in an ordinary situation, but when you're on the trail, anything goes. These come in 4 different sizes, and I included a handful of each size in there. So if I find myself or somebody else in some sort of crazy bind and anything goes, they're worth a shot. And then we have the last container in the box. And what this container has is hardware. And what I did is I included hardware in 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, and then 18, 20, 25, and then a mixed compartment of 30 and 35mm. Lastly, on the end, a bunch of lock nuts and washers. In each of those compartments, I've got a mix of flathead, button head, and cap head screws. I don't normally mix my hardware like that, but I did that in here because I'm trying to keep as much hardware and as many options as possible in one place. I think out of almost anything in this box, this is probably going to be one of the most valuable things. This being nicely organized and with an ample amount of almost any size that I could possibly need, I think this will be a little bit handier, but of course doesn't replace the ability to have something on your back if you're much further away from your vehicle. Now inside here, we still have some other items, and specifically, I want to go over the tools. So we'll go over the tools first. I'm going to pull all of them out of here and lay them out on the mat here in front of me, and we'll kind of go over what I have. So here we have a stripped down version of the tools that I plan to carry. Inside this dynamite piece on the end, it's actually the tool handle and the tools hide down inside of the base. This has almost all of the sizes that you need to work on a vehicle, normally from 1.5mm to 2.5, as well as 3/32, 1/16, and a 3/32 ball end. So it's super nice to have that in a nice compact fashion. You take up minimal amount of space for a maximum amount of tools. I included a 1-inch paintbrush. This is definitely not all that needed, but sometimes it is nice to be able to dust some stuff off before you're trying to work on it. I've got my standard 7mm wheel wrench. Nice to have, a little bit more handy than just a T-wrench. I included one of those small brass hammers that I like so much. This isn't something that I would probably normally have on, when I'm hiking on a trail, but if you're back at the vehicle and you're trying to fix something that's a little bit more in depth, sometimes you'll have something like a bearing seized up and you're trying to get it taken out of place, and you need something to tap on without using another tool or things like that. It's nice to have the proper tool sometimes. Next, I have two different types of razor blade. One is your typical box cutter with, the extendable razor blade. And then we've got the standby trusty X-Acto knife. And then I just have two small sets of pliers. One is a flush cut, to get to zip ties or things like that that are more difficult. And then I've got a standard set of needle nose pliers. You can get most things done with a set of needle nose, so that's why I included that. That is a very minimal set of tools, but I think I could get most things done out in the field with just what I've got here in front of me. Now, with how I have those tools inside of this box, I actually 3D printed a base down in there with two sets of dividers to kind of segment things apart, keeps things from falling too far down where they're hard to reach since this is a narrow compartment. And it keeps things just a little bit more organized so I can put them back in a specific way. And lastly, we're gonna pull out the remaining items and kind of go over what I've got. These last few items are some just in case type options. One is kind of a sunscreen neck, face mask type option. Similarly, I also have kind of an emergency poncho, whether it be for myself or for gear that I need to try and cover up. Next to that, this is a first aid kit. Inside of it is just some basic first aid options, and then I also added some additional things for myself, like ibuprofen and things like that. Just things that I find myself needing and often forgetting. Then I have a couple of spare Spur Gears. These didn't fit into any of the compartments that I had in those separate containers, so those had to stay outside of it. I've got some thin servo tape. That is always handy. Definitely something that I felt needed to be in the box. I've got a partially used roll of electrical tape. When you don't have duct tape, electrical tape, my second choice. And then I just have a couple of Vanquish Velcro straps. You just never know when you could need it, so it's nice to include it for the small cost that they are. So that wraps up my first attempt at this little ammo can trail box idea. I'm hoping that I find it extremely useful over the next upcoming months where we start trail riding a little bit more since it's getting a little cooler. I'm sure you'll see it pop up in future trail running vlogs, but like I said, if you guys have any ideas of things that I forgot, should have included, have better ideas, anything like that, drop them below. I'd love to hear them. If you like the video, hit the like button, subscribe if you're not already, and we'll see you guys on the next one.